Welcome to our regular webinar. Delighted to have guest speakers with us today. So we've got Mike Dean and Suze Harkness from Whisper Claims. So welcome to you both. Thank you for joining me today. Just a little bit of housekeeping before we get started. We will have various slides up today, and Susie's also going to do a short product demo, so be aware of that. But we are recording this webinar, so if you need to go back over anything that we've discussed today, we will send an on-demand version through to everybody who's either watching, registered, or been on our invite list. So that recording will be made available to you. And if you've got any questions that you would like to ask Mike or Suze throughout this presentation, just use the Q&A button on the Zoom toolbar, and we'll try and answer them as we go along, or we'll find some time at the end of the session today to try and get to those questions. So I'm just going to stop sharing my welcome slide, because I know that you, Mike, have got some things that you want to show as we go along. So let me just stop that so that it doesn't leave you without the ability to screen share. Before we get going, Mike, I thought we'd just kind of start off with a bit about Whisper Claims and what you do. So do you want to start us off with a bit of background information?
Yeah, I always answer that question kind of starting from a different point and kind of say what we're not. I think every time R&D gets mentioned, there's a sort of immediate leap to, oh no, there must be consultants. There must be yet another group of cold calling consultants, and we're absolutely not that. So we're not consultants, and we don't work with SMEs directly. What we are is a tech business. We've developed a piece of software, a software tool that helps accountants to efficiently deliver an R&D tech service. Now, we combine that software with two other really key elements. One is a suite of learning tools, so that's training, it's a range of ebooks. In fact, we're going to share an ebook today to kind of give you a flavour of that. We run regular technical webinars as well to support our customers. But really importantly, sitting alongside the software and those learning tools is our advice line. So we have a sort of open access for subscriber firms where they can talk to one of our experts about any challenge that they've got with a claim. So they're sat with their clients and they're working through a particularly tricky area of eligibility, or they're trying to understand, does this client fit with the scheme? We're there to help them. And I think whenever we ask for feedback on the service we deliver, that advice line always comes out top. Fundamental to what we do is the software, but having it wrapped with that advice is really critical.
So just taking a step back from that, Mike, what motivated you to set the business up in the first place? What were you setting out to achieve when you came up with the idea of Whisper Claims?
Well, we launched the business in September 2018. So what's that? 5 and a bit years ago now. And I suppose the 2 years prior to that were where the idea was forming and the business was kind of starting to develop. Now, before I got involved in setting this up, I'd spent 15 years or so working as an interim director, usually on big sales and marketing challenges with clients. And I'd got pulled into one of the bigger R&D tax consultancies to look at their sales and marketing front end in their business. And actually, as was often the case with briefs like that, which was usually, and actually this was the case there as well, the brief is come in and sort out this sales team. The sales team's hopeless. We need to get rid of them all and rebuild. And of course, what you often find is you get into that client and discover that there's nothing wrong with the sales team at all. There's some other business process issue going on in the business. And the key thing in this case was that business was setting a fee threshold. And I'll come back to this a bit later on when we're talking about the current state of the market. They were setting a fee threshold below which they'd walk away from a piece of work. So they were saying if a piece of work was going to generate less than a 4 or 5K's worth of revenue, they'd walk away. But about 70% of all of the opportunities that were coming into the business were smaller than that. So this sort of big sales and marketing machine that they'd built was creating all this opportunity that actually reflected the shape of the market at the time, but they were ignoring it. So every board meeting, I was sort of banging my hand on the table saying what we need is a solution to addressing smaller claims. And for all sorts of reasons I won't bore you with now, the board and the investors didn't want to listen to that. Apart from one of the other board members, a chap called Richard Edwards. Richard was one of the founders of that particular business. He and I sort of saw eye to eye around, well, actually, maybe technology is a way to address this issue of dealing with smaller claims, very much looking at it as solving an internal problem at that stage. Anyway, we put forward a couple of white papers to the board. They didn't want to do it. To cut a long story short, we decided to cut and run and go and build a business around this notion of using technology to build R&D claims efficiently. And right from the outset, our notion was to help the sector to do it more efficiently. It wasn't to build something for SMEs to use themselves. It was more to help service providers address the issue that we'd identified, which was at that stage efficiency in smaller claims. But once we got out in the market and we started testing this idea, you can imagine, before we'd built anything, I was out there with a PowerPoint slide set saying to accountancy firms, if we built something like this, is that something that you might be interested in? What we discovered is that people didn't want something that just dealt with small claims. They wanted something that would help them kind of right across the board with the challenges they had with R&D. And it probably took us 18 months of, testing out ideas, figuring out what a prototype might look like, getting that prototype ready and getting that to market, which was probably middle of 2018. When we had, as I say, we had a live system and revenues coming into the business by September that year. And I think, even in the very early stages, what turned out to I suppose now be embedded as our mission was really starting to form, and that was what we're all about, is empowering accountants to deliver an efficient R&D tax service through this kind of range of tools that I mentioned earlier on.
So from that starting point, where are you today?
Well, I'm going to use a slide to just demonstrate that. So just let me get this up and I'll walk you through it. So where are we today? We're working with about 150 firms nationally. And you can see from that graphic in the middle of the screen there is a really nice wide geographic spread of customers. Actually, I didn't mention that the business is actually based in Edinburgh. So you might imagine there's a huge concentration of customers up in Scotland, and you can see from that graphic that's not the case at all. So working with about 150 firms, different sizes, anything from at one end of the spectrum, one-man bands, to top 100 firms, each addressing sort of slightly different needs. At one end, we're helping people perhaps to enter this market for the first time. So they're looking to lean on us in terms of giving them that structure and giving them the ability to launch a service without having to build a team to do it. Yeah. But at the other extreme, where we're working with larger companies who perhaps already delivering a service, it's all about efficiency. It's about helping them to scale, again, through not having to recruit more people, but also giving them that additional shoulder to lean on when it comes to technical expertise and making sure that they're staying on the right side of the legislation. And we'll talk a little bit about the complexities with that in a minute. But to date, we've had well over 3,000 claims go through the software, which represents now substantially more than $500 million of eligible spend. So that's about 140 million of tax benefit to the clients of our users. So if you kind of put that in perspective in terms of throughput, we're sort of similar to some of the big name specialist firms out there. Our business model is very different, so our revenue model looks very different. But certainly in terms of scale, we've enabled that 150 firms to compete with those bigger service providers. So that's something we're really proud of. And then just over on the right-hand side of this slide, just to give you a flavour, we've won a number of awards as we've kind of been going through this journey. They've been a really interesting mix of technology awards on the one hand that sort of reflect the fact that what we've done is actually really difficult. We've taken a process that is a sort of consultancy-led advisory process and turned that into a software-delivered, highly structured process, and that's been tricky. So that's pleasing that we've been recognised in that way. But then we've also been recognised by the accounting sector as having done something that's really contributing towards, if you like, the greater good of the sector. So that combination of awards has been something, again, that we've been really proud to reflect on.
So just kind of moving on to the kind of specifics of what this is all about. Can you just give a bit of background, Mike, on the R&D tax scheme as it exists today, and why it even exists in the first place?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's designed or intended as an incentive to encourage innovation in the economy. And if you look at OECD statistics, there's 30 odd countries around the world have got an R&D tax scheme of one flavour or another. So there's sort of two, if you like, really headline reasons for the scheme existing. One's to encourage innovation within the country. The other is to act as an attractor for inward investment. So if the UK didn't have an R&D tax scheme, it'd be at a disadvantage to those 30 odd other countries who do. So it's got two kind of key reasons to exist in the first place. Now, in terms of the UK scheme, all of those 30 odd schemes are actually very similar around the world. They're all sort of slightly different flavors of more or less the same thing. But in the UK, there are two schemes currently, although there is legislation being considered at the moment that might change that. So there's a scheme for SMEs and there's a scheme for larger companies.
Yeah.
The SME scheme is designed around enhancing any eligible expenditure. So you establish for a client how much they've spent on qualifying R&D. That's then enhanced in their accounts. So that essentially they've spent more, thus reducing the profits and therefore reducing the tax bill. The larger company scheme, the RDEC scheme, is different to that. That's essentially a cash credit. It's an above the line benefit. So for a company that meets that criteria, essentially they're getting cash back for their spend. A little complication comes in that those two schemes overlap. So you can have an SME that's had spend routed through different elements. It might be, for instance, they've had grant funding. That grant funding results in some of their spend going through the RDEC scheme. So you get this kind of overlap of the two schemes, which creates quite a bit of complexity in the way claims have to be assembled. But as I say, in overall terms, the scheme's there to encourage innovation and to act as a kind of competitive measure for the UK globally.
And obviously, I mean, we all read the news. We get, accounting web and accountancy, and I know that a lot of our clients have said this is a challenging market at the moment. So summarize for us, if you would, Mike, kind of what's happened in the last 12 months that's made it a particularly challenging market.
Yeah, well, there's a bunch of things to talk about here. So over the last 12 months or so, there's been a bunch of structural changes to the scheme. So that's the left-hand side of this slide. I'll walk through those in a second. But those structural changes have been also associated with some behavioural changes that have hit us from HMRC as well. And the kind of backdrop to all of this is that HMRC have recognised that perhaps haven't policed the scheme very well over the last number of years, and therefore the scheme suffered from some quite serious issues around fraud, and certainly some impacts around people misunderstanding the scheme, misunderstanding eligibility, and because of that kind of lack of policing, a lot of spend has gone through the scheme kind of dare I say unmanaged, for want of a better term. So HMRC have taken a bit of a kick in from Treasury, and what you see in here on this slide is really as a result of all of that. So in terms of those structural changes, there's been a squeeze on the enhancement rates for the SME scheme. I mentioned there that's how that scheme works. So the rates have been squeezed down from 130% to 86%, and that's had a really big knock-on effect in terms of shifts in the market, but we'll talk about those later on. That at the same time has been associated with an increase in the RDEC rate. So you can see there that HMRC can see perhaps more benefit in their eyes from incentivizing larger companies to do more R&D, and that's what they're doing with that shift. They've also introduced a new measure or a new rate for R&D intensive SMEs, although that hasn't yet bedded in terms of legislation. They've then introduced some new areas of eligible spend, so that's pure maths, data licenses, cloud computing. So that means that the scheme is now able to encompass some areas that have perhaps been kicking around for a while as obvious areas of eligible activity that the scheme didn't cover, and it now does. And then a really big change, which is why it's highlighted here, is the implementation of a new form called the Additional Information Form just in August this year. Now, for the very first time, HMRC are now mandating a minimum number of detailed project descriptions within a claim. And within those project descriptions, you also need to break down the associated costs. Now, the scheme was managed in a slightly looser fashion prior to this, but this has had a considerable impact on the market, and actually had a big impact on our software as well. So when Suze walks you through the demo shortly, you get a flavour for some of the things that we've needed to implement with this. And actually, the changes around that have been so impactful that, back to what I mentioned earlier on about learning tools, we put an ebook together purely about the AIF and its impact, and Suze will post that up as a link for you. So feel free to download that if you want more info about the AIF. And just to kind of complicate matters, at the same time as announcing the AIF, HMRC introduced another form, claim notification form. So people were getting confused about what form does what. Is there only one form? Is there two forms? And again, you read through that ebook, you'll get a good flavour for the differences. And then another measure was HMRC have been looking at disallowing any overseas expenditure being included in claims as well. And in fact, they've declared that that's now pushed out to 2024. So unfortunately for us, that was one of the things that we built into the software really early on. So we now have a feature kind of waiting in the wings for April 2024 that's around disallowing that overseas qualifying expenditure. Now, I mentioned, so that's the structural side of this. At the same time, because of what I mentioned about fraud particularly, HMRC's behaviour towards the scheme has changed significantly as well. So there's been a bunch of consultations with the market. There's been a lot of House of Lords scrutiny around proposals for the project. And in fact, sort of associated with all of that, there's been a number of people gone to jail already for fraud around the scheme. So in terms of kind of flushing out bad behaviour and specifically illegal activity, that these changes have been quite effective already. I should just say, by the way, in terms of that legal action and people going to jail, that is for serious fraud. We're not talking about, pushing the boundaries of the scheme here. We're talking about people putting in claims for companies that don't exist through accountancy firms that don't really exist. We're at the extreme end there. So one of the measures that HMRC introduced, I guess sort of late summer last year, was what they call their scale response, so one-to-many communications. So starting to write to thousands of claimants. So this is people who are making claims for the first time, or perhaps claiming with a company that's got an SIC code that sounds like it's in an area that might not be eligible. And questioning those people about, you sure you've made a legitimate claim? Are you sure you're working with a legitimate provider? And that one-to-many approach, as I say, they refer to it as the scale approach, has meant that they've also introduced a kind of scale approach to the way they deal with the aftermath of those comms. So thousands of letters going out. We think something like 10 to 12,000 letters went out in the second half of last year to claimants. So people are responding to that with information. No, I'm sure my claim's legitimate. Here's the claim. Here's further information. So HMRC have been kind of inundated with those responses and are no longer able to offer a kind of one-to-one service. So it's now nigh on impossible if you're a small claimant to speak to an inspector or a caseworker, as they now refer to them. So now the communications has gone kind of online and very often, and that has kind of brought a number of challenges with it as well. We hope that post August the 8th and those changes that I mentioned, that that is going to slow down over time and get better. You're going to see less of that one-to-many communication. You're going to see the AIF itself being used as a mechanism to filter out claims and to filter out certain service providers that HMRC don't want to deal with. But I think no matter how things settle down, and I'm confident they will, this kind of enhanced scrutiny, certainly higher inquiry rates going forward, is going to be a feature of the scheme in future, because that's why HMRC have had the kick in from Treasury, is that they haven't been policing it closely enough.
Yeah.
In the past.
So with all these changes, Mike, has that had a big impact on your business and the way in which you work with your clients?
I would say yes. So there's maybe a few observations to make. At one end of and I kind of see the market we're operating in, the accountancy practices we're working with, has been on a spectrum from small to large. At the smaller end, we've seen a number of people walk away from the scheme. So they might have been hit by a number of inquiries coming through that kind of one-to-many mechanism, and that's unusual compared to their experience of the scheme in the past. And they've sat there and said it's not worth it for us. At the other end of the spectrum, we're seeing firms saying, do you know what, this is an area of opportunity. There are people pulling out of the market. There are clients who are unsupported, if you like, by those previous mechanisms. We need to step up and find a way to work with these clients. So at one end, we're seeing people walk away. At the other end, we're seeing people step up. So it's a real kind of black and white market just now. And I think one of the things we've noticed just recently is, and you'll see this in LinkedIn posts and so on, a number of specialist consultants have also dropped out of the market. And we've been trying to get our heads around, so why is that? If you're a specialist R&D consultant, you're seeing these changes, why would you suddenly sort of throw your hands up and walk away? I think there's a number of reasons. One is actually some of those consultants might be the people HMRC are trying to target, and they want them out of the market. So they've hit them deliberately with a large number of inquiries. The other is, if you think about it, if you're putting through, let's go extreme and say 1,000 claims a year, and the inquiry rate's gone from less than 1%, so maybe getting 10 inquiries, to now 15 to 20%. So I've now got 200 inquiries to
They're
deal
busy.
with. That overhead is massive. And that's enough to put some of those businesses under. Whereas I think if you look at it, our core customer base for accountancy firms, who largely might be putting through, half a dozen, maybe 10 claims a year, a lot of them. So they've gone from maybe having no inquiries to perhaps having 2. So in terms of the overall impact on their business, it's neither here nor there. It's a pain, but it's not here nor there. And of course, they're more focused on doing a great job for their clients. So they're not kind of getting battered quite so much as some of those specialist providers that kind of sit in the middle of the market.
And do you see that changing in the future, Mike? I mean, if you've got a crystal ball, what would you say the future holds in that sector?
I think there's a few things. If you sort of read into the changes that HMRC are making and what they want to see, it seems pretty obvious to me that they want this kind of unregulated cowboy element of the market to go away, and they're looking to accountancy firms to step up, because it's the accountancy firms who are accredited professional people, who I think HMRC want to see doing more of this stuff. And if I kind of go back to our motivation in setting this business up in the first place, one of the things we were looking to do was put the right tools into the hands of the right people. And I think in that sense, we're totally aligned with where HMRC are right now. So I think you'll see a lot more accountants getting involved in delivering this service in future, and perhaps taking the place of those smaller consultancies that HMRC perhaps want to see move out the market. Okay.
Well, I suggest this is a good time maybe to dive in, have a look at the product. Yeah.
Go on, Suze, that's over to you. Pressure's
okay.
on.
Me, right, sorry, let me just share my screen. Okay. Super. Rightio. Well, this is Whisper Claims. There's 3 key dashboards that you use to manage your client's data. So I'll give you a quick tour through the dashboards, and then we'll dive into the process, and I'll show you the report download output and also the additional information form output. That's really key to the new processes that have been implemented. So homepage dash, your gateway into the whole of the system. You've got your access to recent clients and recent claims here. Mike has talked at length about the advice line and additional support wrap that we have with our software. Everywhere you are within the app, you're going to be able to access that support. So if I just hover over this question mark icon here, you're going to see our phone number, and you can also email us from within the app. We have another channel, our live chat channel here. So when you're logged into the app, you also get through to our support team. So all of those 3 channels all go through to the same place, headed up by Jen, who runs support and is there to help, as Mike said, with any eligibility scheme related questions that you have, there to give advice, to listen to any questions or queries that you have and help you along your way. I will just very quickly show you in our admin that we have access for you to come in and view things like your profile, subscription details, add and remove users, and we have like a nice report styling wizard here in the background, which just enables you to do things like add some bells and whistles to the reports that you're producing. You can change the colors of the reports. You can of the reports if you want to. When it comes to working with a customer for the first time, you have to create them in the client tab, which is where I'm just taking you here. When you add a client into the client tab, I'll just start typing. You're going to see data being pulled through. This is our company's house integration that's going to do a pre-fill of the name and the company number for you. The UTR, the POE, and if applicable, the VAT reference is all mandatory information that we need to set up a company that's required for the additional information form, which we'll look at a bit later on. Once you've created a company in the client tab, you're then able to start working on a claim. So I'm just going to take you into our workflow dashboard here, where you can create new claims, access claims that are in progress and completed claims. It's also where you're going to find your downloadable reports and additional information form outputs, which are stored for easy access here in the dashboard. It's very straightforward. Click on the green tab, you'll get a drop down with all of the companies that you've already created in the previous dashboard. You click add claim, and that will launch you into a fresh question set. You'll notice running along the top or the middle of the screen here that you've got sortable columns. The sort function is there to help you maybe prioritize things like hard deadlines, maybe pick up work for team members if they're maybe away or they've left, or maybe you're doing some work together. All sorts of different ways that you can manage your client data within the dash. You can also do things like request for claims to be unlocked. So if, for example, you've downloaded a claim and you've noticed during the review stage that maybe there's some edits or amendments that need to be made, you can come into the dashboard, request for a claim to be unlocked, and make any edits or amendments and refinalize and re-download prior to claim submission. Let me just take you into a claim now. This is my training claim, and I've purposely made this claim post 1st of April 2023, which will become apparent in just a minute as we start working through the claim. So into the question set, whenever you're in a question set, you're always going to be able to access support, and you're also going to see the company number and the year end that you're working on. Whisper Claims offers a structure and a framework to guide you through the preparation process, making sure that all of the corners of the scheme are being poked into. And your role as advisor is front and centre throughout this, and this is most definitely not just a form filling exercise. You have a decision engine here in the background that is going to assess how spend is being routed as you work through the process, and it's going to keep you on the right side of HMRC with eligibility checkers, that sort of thing, based on the way that you're answering your questions, and I'll show you that as we go through. So over on your left, you've got your progress / navigation bar. So these are all of the sections that you're going to work through as you go through a claim. Every single page starts with a question or a statement, and the way that you answer those questions or statements, you've got buttons. You're going to see sliders, drop downs, multiple choice questions, lots of different ways to apply your client's data. Every single question has its own in-app help and support. So as well as being able to give us a ring or live chat us, you've got some notes, a short video, and links that take you directly to the guidance on HMRC's website should you need it. Every single question also has a note section. So this is here acting a bit like a Google Doc. It's time and date stamped and can serve several purposes. It could be that you are wanting to leave justifications for why you've answered a question in a certain way. It could be that you want to point to evidence that sits somewhere else, should there be any questions or queries raised downstream. It could be that you use it as an internal tool to help team members when you're reviewing claims. And it could be to communicate with collaborators as well, which I'll show you a bit more about in just a moment. You've also got a flagging tool. So if you are working with collaborators, you can flag specific questions that you want to point them to directly, just to make it easier for them to identify which questions they need to answer. And very finally, on every single page, you have dynamic feedback. This is just based on a red, amber, green protocol. Green is everything's good, let's move on to the next question. Amber serves a couple of different purposes: identifying if there's a weakness in the claim, is there to potentially let you know that you need to be asked some additional questions based on the way that you've answered the question you're on, and is there to give feedback and information about various bits of the journey that you're going through. Very finally, this is not where we want to be, but you may also see red feedback. This is an endpoint that you've reached, and the system has made a decision based on the way that you've answered a question that the claim does not meet HMRC. To do is help you screen that client front loaded. The idea being that we don't want to take you all the way through the process, get to the end and the computer says no. We want to help you screen out clients quickly and easily, so as not to waste your time or your client's time. The first part of the process is a basic qualification check. And this is here just to help you understand if your client meets the very minimum criteria to be able to move forward. So as a user, it's with you to fill out these questions when you start working with a new customer. Mike's already mentioned pre-notification, so I will just mention this within the qualification checks. For any claims that start 1st of April 2023 onwards, they are subject to pre-notification. So if a client hasn't claimed at all for R&D tax relief, or if they haven't claimed within the last 3 years, they will not meet the criteria to be able to make a claim. So we're going to screen clients out at that point. Obviously, we don't want customers moving through the process and paying for and downloading reports if they haven't met the criteria for pre-notification. Just a couple of other questions that I'll gently scroll through for the qualification checks before we hit the company section. So when we're in the company section, we're starting to build a picture about the client that we're working with here. For example, if we don't meet the SME threshold, the system's going to flag that for us in the background. So the system knows that we're now looking at an RDEC claim. Fundamentally, the way that you're going to work through the process is exactly the same. You're just getting that heads up. And a really key feature from this point within the app onwards is our collaboration tool. So this is a feature that enables you, if you want to, it is optional, enables you to invite your clients onto the software to provide data, to help move the claim forward, and also provide transparency to your client about the expectations of the process and all the depth of information that's required. To add a collaborator is really straightforward. You just click on the link, a form pops up, fill out the form, that will send an email to the individual that you're inviting on, and you can add an unlimited number of collaborators per claim. Due to certain sensitivities within an R&D tax claim, such as salaries, there is an ability for you to further restrict access to certain parts of the claim by switching on and off the cost question toggle. This is just something you would identify between the team that you're working with. Individuals who are less senior members of the team shouldn't see things like salaries. In most cases, so you can switch off access to the costs so that those less senior members of the team can only see projects.
So just to sorry to knock you off your stride. Just while you're on that collaborators function, we looked at some data just in the last week actually on the number of claims going through that involve collaborators, and interestingly, it's gone through the roof since that 8th of August implementation of the AIF and some of the changes you'll show in the software later on. And we think that's because now that there's this kind of mandate from HMRC that's demanding more detail on the projects, that our customers are then leaning on their clients to put that information directly into the system. And so we're seeing that with existing customers, but I think in the demos that you've done recently, in the last just in the last few weeks, we're seeing more and more of new customers approaching us, specifically wanting to access that that collaborator function. And I think this sort of ability to collaborate and work more closely with the client on a claim is a feature of the scheme going forward. That, you know, having advisors that And not doing that is going to be a thing of the past. The deeper the relationship, the better with the client. So sorry, that was just a reflection on some of the data we pulled out in the last couple of weeks. Thanks, Suze.
Thanks, Mike. Okay, so company section, I'll just bash through this quite quickly, but just to give you again a flavour of how the system's working in the background and constantly making decisions. If we're part of a group, you're just getting some feedback here to let you know that you need to be asked some more questions about that group again, so the system in the background can make sure that spend is being routed appropriately for the final outcome. The next part of the process is this big chunky bit here. This is the project section. So the project section, and I'll just start scrolling through the questions as well. The project section focuses on all of the work that your client has been undertaking over the financial period, helping you and your client to understand where eligibility sits, prompting conversations and helping you gather all of the data that you need for the report. So in this question, we were looking just there about the type of R&D the client is doing. We're going to look at the competent professionals. We're going to try to understand what challenges the competent professionals were facing during the periods. And we're going to look at things like outputs. So just again, this is a procedural thing, making sure that your client has evidence to support the claims that they're the work that they're claiming for, and reminding them that they need to archive those records. Handling complexities like grants. Again, this can affect how spend is routed, but we also want to demonstrate to HMRC that we've done our due diligence and we understand how, if they are present, grants can impact the claim. And then the very final bit during the project section is again something that Mike's already alluded to, a new part of the process, which has come from the additional information form, where we need to now identify how many projects we're going to be claiming for. And this is, as I said, to comply with the AIF. So HMRC have mandated that a certain number of projects needs to be described in detail, and the number of projects that needs to be described depends on how many projects are being included in the claim and what proportion of the overall cost they represent. The last thing you want to be is midway through completing the additional information form, only to realise that you can't move forward because you've not got enough information handy and you have to go back to your client to get more. So we're going to make sure that you don't end up in that position. The final bit of the project section then is we now need a mechanism to start gathering costs against these projects so that we can identify what this overall spend is and what percentage of work each of these projects represents. So we just need to give the system a list of all of the projects that we're claiming for. So this is my 5 here before we go on to the cost section. So next bit of the process is cost. So the first cost we come up against is the staff costs. So you can manually add this data into the app if you want to. However, we do have a CSV upload function. So if you've got this as a data dump from your client's financial software package, you can pull this information down to pre-populate the table in front of you. Let me just quickly show you the next cost category as well, which is now we've got the staff costs in. We're now going to allocate staff time across the 5 projects. I do just want to show you the software section as well, again, relating to this claim being post-April 2023. Mike has again already mentioned about additional cost categories that have been introduced from this year onwards. Just to be clear, if you are doing a claim that was pre-April 2023, you wouldn't see the cost categories for cloud computing and data licenses because they're not eligible. So as well as taking you through the process, we're always keeping you right in making sure that you're only including information that is pertinent to the financial period that you're working in. The last bit of the process, let me just quickly scroll through the cost categories, is the technical detail section. So now we've gone through the process of gathering all of the costs and allocating them to the various projects that we're claiming for. We are going to go into the technical detail section, which is where we are initially presented with, again, that list of projects. And what you'll see is the system has pulled through all of the data and given us an output showing us which projects represent how much spend. And we've also got a tool here to help us decide which projects we want to describe in more detail. So in my example here of 5 projects overall in this claim, I know that I need to describe a minimum of 3, which is what I've selected here. So if I try to only select 2 projects, even though one of my projects down here represents more than 50% of the overall qualifying spend, you're going to see the system isn't going to let me move forward. So again, we're constantly making sure that you have everything you need for the additional information form. That's me ready to move forward now. I've selected 3. And then the final bit of the process that you're going to see is the technical detail section. So this is the section that's been specifically designed to make it easier for you to only include information that HMRC require for the additional information form and to help HMRC assess whether the claim qualifies for relief or not. You've got this very structured template here, which if I just gently scroll through, you've got your technical leads, your field of science and technology, your start and end month, so that's the period of time within this financial year that the technical problem solving took place for this project, and then your 4 key areas, your baseline, your advance, your uncertain, your resolution, an image and an image description. Just a quick note that collaborators will leave the process at this point. Once a collaborator submits their data, from now on, they are essentially locked out of the system while you move into review, and you can see you've got a little note at the top of the screen there. Collaborators coming in once you're in review stage and messing about with any of the data. So that's why we lock the system down to collaborators once you're in review. There's quite a lot going on this page, and I'm aware of my time, so I'll be very quick. On your left-hand side, you've got a claim summary review page. So this is just an output of all of the numerical data that's been collected over the claim, giving you a chance to stop and take a breath and make sure that everything makes sense before you move through to finalising and downloading your claim. You can go back and edit the question set at any point from this page too. On your right-hand side, I've got something that I've purposely made look quite horrible. This is our in-app claim risk assessment. This is an automated risk assessment of your client's claim based on a high, medium or low score. This is not a measure of eligibility. If there is anything that's been included in your client's claim that may pique HMRC's interest, and we're helping you to understand what those things are and help you to take steps to mitigate against them. So looking at things like SIT codes, looking at the size of the company versus turnover, grants, group structures and shareholdings, that sort of thing. Below that, you're going to see an approximate qualifying spend. So we've got a spend through the SME scheme only here, and then you're going to see your finalised claim button along with the price for the report. So if I just quickly tap on the finalised claim button, this is the wow moment. This is the bit where you don't need to worry about writing your report. We're going to do all of that legwork for you. It just takes a couple of seconds for the system to baseline the figures and write the narrative. That's it done. Still going, there we go, that's it done, and then we're now ready to download. Before you download, you do have the opportunity to tap into one of our additional wraparound services. That's our claim review service. So this is a optional level of reassurance should you feel you need it. Jen in our support team will do a deep dive desk-based review of your claim. All you need to do is add the review to your basket before you download, which is what I'm going to do now. When you download, you're going to see your reports. This is your PDF and a Word version of the report, which is exactly the same, and also your additional information form. I'm very quickly going to download these documents to quickly show you before I hand back to Mike and Joe to finish off. Does that come up for me? There we go. I think I might need to reshare my screen. Sorry about this, guys. There we go. Do apologise, my Wi-Fi is clunking away there in the background, waiting for that to load up, but I'll quickly show you what the structure of the report looks like and the AIF. There we go, that's it coming up now. So this is your report. So if I just gently start scrolling through, you've got a cover page with all of your clients' data on it, your named contacts, and your details will appear on there too. A table of contents, and all of your system-generated narrative that tops and tails that we will get to in just over here. Just want to quickly show you the tables in the reports. There we go, we're just getting to those now. Oops, gone through a bit quickly there. This is your outputs by projects. And then you've got some appendices as well down here. And let me just quickly reshare my screen so I can show you the additional information form output, which is the last bit of the process, which is the first part of your submission process, filling out the additional information form. This is a text file made very so as not to introduce any additional characters into the form. This file is laid out in all of the relevant sections that map the additional information form, which makes the process of filling out that portal very quick and simple. All of the data and information you need for your additional information form is stored here in this document and in the dashboard, ready for you to go back to whenever you need to. I'll hand back.
Brilliant, thanks.
Amazing, thanks, Suze.
Just a quick note on the we posted that link up to the AIF ebook earlier on. That document includes a lot of detail about how you submit the AIF, the sort of technical process with HMRC. So if you're interested in that, it's covered in the ebook.
So I'm just going to run a quick poll here. If anybody's had a look at that demo, let me just launch that. Give you the opportunity. If you'd like some follow-up, whether it's book a one-to-one demo, set up a trial, or just stay in touch with some more with R&D updates that are provided through Whisper Claims.
Brilliant. Did I
Thank you.
Pricing, Jo, while that's up?
Yeah, that's fine.
I'll just get another slide up. There we go. So just to kind of walk through what our pricing model is, we've got two pricing models. Core price, which is essentially what most of our customers pay, or the basis that they pay us. So that's a monthly subscription of £100 a month. That gives you access to all of the support that we've talked about and gives you access to the software. And on that model, you pay a download fee for each report that's produced. So that's capped at £600. So the most you would ever pay is £600, but it's based on 2% of the eligible spend up to that cap. So to put a bit of a colour on that, if you've got a small claim with just say 10K's worth of eligible spend, that would go through as a £200 download, 2% of 10K. We also have an enterprise pricing model. So with some of our bigger customers, we work on the basis of a fixed monthly fee that's worked out, set against their forecast usage of the software. We often get asked what sort of volume gets you into that pricing model. It's actually not as much as you'd think. So a couple of claims a month, so 20 plus claims a year, we'd be talking to you about a fixed monthly fee in an enterprise pricing model. So if you feel that you're in that kind of bracket, happy to have that conversation. As I say, in terms of both models, you get access to everything that we've described, from the advice line, software itself, claim review service, right through to our training courses, learning tools, etc., are all available to you. So that gives you a good flavour.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Well, I'm going to end our webinar at this point. I just want to say a big thank you to Mike and Suze for joining me today. I think some good insights into the R&D world. Thank you, Mike, and a good review of the platform. Thanks very much, Suze. I'll make sure that Mike and Suze get your feedback on those of you that want the demo or the free trial. That'll come out of the report on here. So thank you for completing that on the poll. And we will send you the on-demand version of the webinar. I'm just going to leave you with the contact details for Whisper Claims. So if you do want to get in touch directly, don't feel you have to speak to me. Go to Mike directly. Emails on the screen, websites on the screen. And thanks very much, Mike. I'm sure we'll do more webinars in the future, especially when we get some clarification, hopefully in the autumn statement, or maybe even bigger changes in the budget. Who knows?
There'll be more changes for us to talk about, I'm sure.
Well, that's fine. Well, the nice thing is now that we all know you, we can hopefully share those R&D updates with all of our clients. So thank you very much for your time today, and thanks everybody for attending.